So today's discussion is going to be all about food, drinks, and events, library policy insights. Fun stuff for a Friday, right? And I can't really think of a better topic though to talk about on Friday the 13th. So I'm going to kind of spearhead the conversation today, get things going with what we do over here at Wooddale. And then I'll kind of bounce between Christine and kind of keep the conversation going to see what everybody else is doing at their libraries. But first things first, introductions, just in case there are some unfamiliar folks in the audience. My name is Chris Rinkoziak, and I'm the director of the Wooddale Public Library in scenic Wooddale, Illinois, just a couple minutes west of O'Hare Airport. In case you hear some rumbling in the background, it is a plane going into O'Hare Airport, just FYI. I've been the director here for about 2 years, and I am very proud to say that the first policy that I passed with my board after becoming director was alcohol at library events, which is why I was asked to lead this conversation. And that policy is available on our website. Feel free to head over there and grab that. I can drop the link. Let's see if I can pull that up real quick in the chat for everybody just to kind of save some clicks if you want to take a spin through that. It was vetted by our lawyer, so I know it is sound. At least it was 2 years ago when we passed this thing. Essentially, with alcohol at library events, there was a law passed. Gosh, I don't even remember when. That went through just like every other law that basically said that libraries can host events with alcohol. But there are some stipulations with that, right? Like we the way that we run it over here, and the advice that we got both from our legal representation, Roger Ritzman, if that's a familiar name for anybody out there, as well as through our liability insurance folks up over at the fine folks who operate the Lyra program. Um, they basically said alcohol is fine because of this law, good to go there. Just don't get in the business of selling it, right? So we can't go and sell a can of beer for $5 or anything quite like that. We have to, if we wanted to recoup the costs for some of those things, we could charge admission to the event. We could charge slight deposit and give out drink tickets for that. But we just can't charge for the alcohol itself. Because that gets into a dram shop kind of situation. I'm not entirely sure what the technical is behind it. They just said don't do it, so I don't do it. But what we do is we still card every single person that comes in, even if they are painfully obviously over 21, or we've known them for years and years and years as library patrons, and we just know that they're over 21. We still card everybody as they walk in the door. It makes me feel comfortable as the director. It makes me feel comfortable allowing folks and treating everybody kind of the same and checking those IDs. We do not let anybody into program rooms who's under 21, even if they're not going to be consuming alcohol. So those events are strictly for adults, and they are typically contained into a program room where we can kind of really keep the constraints on that. We've talked about having some of these programs outside. We're very fortunate here to have a really nice outdoor patio and story walk area that kind of just lends itself nicely to some outdoor programs. We'll talk about that in a moment too. But for now, we've just limited it to one program room, and it's worked out very well for us. It was kind of interesting. We typically do 4 to 5 of these events every year. This past Cinco de Mayo was the first time that we deviated from beer or wine at one of these things. We held a margarita mixing and tasting kind of class. Um, which was interesting. We're not really going to talk about vetting different presenters or different vendors for these types of things today, I don't think, unless the conversation veers in that direction. But um, that was interesting in the sense that the presenter had a couple of aides with her, and she came in with some blenders, and she actually mixed these drinks, had frozen ones, had on the rocks ones. And that was just kind of nice for patrons to enjoy. Unfortunately, those of us who are working those kinds of events are on the clock, right? So we don't consume alcohol when we're on the clock. That's another stipulation that we just do not do. One, it doesn't look super duper classy, and two, you never know what something's going to happen or how various people can react to alcohol. So it's best that everybody on staff remains as sober and good to go as possible throughout all those events. Not to mention we're in the suburbs, so we're all driving for the most part, anyways. Um, we limited ourselves to about an ounce, ounce and a half kind of samples. I've had us print up and make these little tiny shot glasses. It says Wooddale Public Library on it. Let me do my little social media thing. It says Wooddale Public Library on it, and then it says read responsibly underneath it. And this is kind of fun for us, only because it's a 2 ounce sample that we generally leave about a quarter of the way empty. So we're roughly giving, an ounce, ounce and a half size samples, whether it's beer or wine or, as we stepped into in May, a cocktail of sorts. Um, and that's just a nice palatable sort of sample size for everybody. We typically do not do more than 4 or 5 samples of those. Um, and we always have water available too if somebody asks for a bottle of water or if they need some sort of a refreshment or a chaser, if you will, just to kind of bring them back to where they are. Uh, are there any questions about any of that?
Is that
Yeah.
4 or 5 samples per person? Or,
Yes.
okay.
How do you track that, Chris?
So the way that it typically works, with the exception of this last one where she was kind of blending and going at the same time, it was a little bit more chaotic, but it still kind of worked in the same way. Where if we're doing a wine tasting, for example, the presenter is in the room talking about the wine, talking about the history of wine, doing whatever it is that he or she or they are doing. And then those of us who are working the program are in the back in a little either different program room or a kitchen, and we're actually serving these things out and deviating them, and then we're presenting them sort of waiter and waitress style on a tray. So everybody gets one, and we know that we just don't give more than one sample to any one person. Like let's say there's 2 people sitting in an audience, sitting in the audience, and one person takes a sip and they don't like it, and they give it to their friend or their partner, whoever they're with. We can't really control that. We're not going to get that level of policing, but that's at least how we know we're only giving one sample of that one serving to an individual person.
Okay. And then is there any issue with you guys being the ones serving the food to someone, like handing it off? Like, is there any sanitation things or training
Sure.
with that?
We typically wear gloves. We use kitchen safe gloves for that, both in preparation and in serving those things. A couple of staff members have gone through food safety training. We used to be a library that provided free food over the summer, free lunches over the summer. So some folks have that working knowledge. I myself used to work at Starbucks, so I remember the cross-contamination and had to go through all of that kind of training and stuff. So some of it's anecdotal. If it's completely new to you or to your library, I would 100% recommend going through some sort of a food safety training just to have those things in the back of your mind, right? Like we're not going to be working with raw food necessarily at the library, but if you have gloves on and you're doing something and then you go and touch something else and then put it down, you've just contaminated your glove, right? So you can't use that to go back. And it's just little things like that that seem sort of like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But you really have to remember in the moment.
Yeah. To add to that, I'm curious. I used to volunteer with the Palatine Rotary. And if you were going to serve alcohol, if you were going to be working the beer tent, you had to do this alcohol training.
Right.
So I'm wondering if that's a little bit different. And then also when I was at my other organization, we did have a celebration grand opening thing, and only the certified alcohol person could serve the half a glass of Prosecco that we were, so I'm curious about how you guys were able to actually serve.
Yeah, it could be completely different based on organization. It could be completely different based on municipality and local laws like that.
Okay.
Um, I know I've worked for different nonprofits or volunteered in different spaces at different beer tents, and I was never asked or trained or anything other than like this is the proper way to do a tap kind of thing.
Oh,
That
interesting.
was the
So
only training that I've ever gone through for anything like that. So it must be either
city,
organizationally different or
yeah, per
municipality.
town, maybe what they require.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that's
You didn't
interesting.
have to have a dram license or anything?
Nope.
Okay,
We
because
confirm
when
enough to
I
be
worked
sure
at
we
a
can.
banquet hall, I couldn't serve because I didn't have that certified. But what she's talking about, that alcohol.
Sure. I know when I used to work for Target as well, and I was doing the checkout lane, like I couldn't, even though I was over 21, I couldn't check out alcohol to somebody unless I had that kind of There's a different name for it for checking IDs and stuff. But Bassett training, that's what it was. I couldn't serve, and that was a target rule. That wasn't an anything else rule. That was just an organizational rule that they had.
Did you check into whether you needed that, or are you just assuming you don't need the alcohol certification?
Uh, our our liability insurance folks did not say
Okay.
that we need that. No.
Okay,
I wonder how much of it depends on the county you're in or like Target, like where their corporate office is and what those guidelines are might dictate how they have to facilitate throughout the country. So,
I'm looking at the chat from Kari. Libraries in 2014, requester Senator Hayne introduced a bill to amend the Illinois Liquor Code. Alcoholic liquors may be sold or delivered in the building located at an address. Another property in Granite City or Pontoon Beach, Illinois, owned and occupied by the, wow, okay, so that got really specific for just that one library. That's kind of cool. I would say if in a previous job when I was at the Lincolnwood Library, we would host events after hours and we would actually pay a bartender to come in and they're the ones who would have the dram insurance and have all of that information. And if you're able to afford that, if your budget allows for that, I would say go for that. That's just an extra layer of protection. Is it necessary? Not 100%, at least not in my case or in my municipality. But oof, it takes a lot of pressure off when somebody else is the one who's got to, especially depending on what the event is, right? Like if it's a fundraiser event and it goes for several hours and there's multiple pours and full glasses of stuff, yeah, you probably do want somebody on working the or working the event that has that insurance, or at least has the knowledge of knowing when to cut somebody off if they get a little bit too much or if anything like that. But knowing that we are not going to be exploring those opportunities here, knowing that we're only going to be serving this much of one type of thing 3 or 4 or 5 times, um, our liability insurance folks said, no, you don't need to worry about that.
Were staff bummed that they couldn't drink, like, especially since it was such a teeny amount, like.
Uh, yes and no. More so when there's not like cans of something or bottles of something that are just left over that we can, take home and sample. It was really difficult to pour out those little samples of a margarita and not be like, take a little sip or something just to try it. But in theory, as long as there's leftovers afterward, no, they're not too upset by it.
Chris, could you talk a little like who purchases? So let me backtrack.
Sure.
Have you always only served as part of a program that was about alcohol, or or did you ever serve like, hey, it's the library's birthday, we're having wine, or was it always like specific to a program?
Sure. Here at Wooddale, it was always specific to a program. Um, at Lincolnwood, it was typically also associated with the program. There was a plant and sip kind of a night where people made little train terrariums and got, 4 ounces of wine as a pour. I think they got 2 drink tickets for that. There was a fundraiser event that we partnered with for our friends and the PTA, and we served alcohol at that. But here in Wooddale, it's very specific. This is an alcohol-based program. There's a little bit of a learning component to it. And then, by the way, you get a sample of what you're learning about.
Okay.
That's how we frame it.
So that goes to like my next question, which maybe you can provide insight. Are you, do the presenters then purchase the alcohol, or are there issues with library employees doing the purchasing and being reimbursed? Are there any issues with that?
Sure. It's situationally dependent. The lady who did the margarita stuff for us, she came fully equipped and had all of the mixers, the fruit, the ice, and the alcohol. She purchased those. That was part of the what we paid for her to do. When we had Linford Winery, when we had somebody well, Linford Winery, we bought the wine from them and the lady just showed up with it. But we had to buy a certain amount. And that's where it's kind of nice where you have a little bit of extra or something, just to take home with you if you want to sample something or save it and do a staff raffle or something like that. We've also had a presenter talk about the history of beer. There's a library director, I think he's in the Joliet area, knows anything and everything you could possibly want to know about beer and then some. And what he kind of does with his presentations is he talks about a specific style of beer, a specific type of beer, the history of it, blah, blah, blah. And then he gave us recommendations to go to Benny's and say, hey, get this, get this, get this, get this, get as much as you think you're going to need for your audience. And that's easy enough for us to do. The managers here have library credit cards.
Okay.
It's really easy to go and make those purchases. And then it's kind of nice when you do that because if you have extras, then you can just take it back and return it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
So more questions. So how did that help attendance, or did you get comments like, oh my gosh, makes the library so much more fun? What kind of feedback did you get?
Yeah, I've not gotten any negative feedback, which is great. And I've seen a lot more people than I have before at certain programs, or just new people.
Mm.
There's kind of the typical, and what I really expected, the obvious one, the low-hanging fruit in this situation is a lot of husbands being dragged by their wives to come to this as a little date night, because we typically do these sort of events Friday or Saturday after hours. We close at 5 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, and so we host these events at 7, typically either on a Friday or a Saturday. Um, but we also saw a lot of younger people, a lot of younger couples come to the library and actually go to a program like this, which I thought was kind of nice and interesting too. The one missing component from all of this is childcare, right? Like if we could provide childcare in the back of the library while this is happening in the front of the library, then we've given the community a wonderful date night or a wonderful activity for them to do. So that's kind of our missing component with this, but we've seen so many new faces, so many returning faces also. So we're kind of keeping our power users happy by giving them something new and something different. And then we're just seeing new faces come to the library for the first time as well.
Cool. That's great. Then your board can be like, oh yes, this was a good idea.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and to be honest, I usually have at least 2 or 3 board members in the audience for these,
Yeah.
which is really nice to see.
Remind me, did you have to have any approval from the city?
No.
Okay.
And we're a district library, so I can't really speak to how that would be if you were a municipal library. But for a district like us, no. Which was kind of surprising. We also didn't need to get permission to have a food truck for our recent kickoff party or anything like that. So, and I'm
Nice.
much more of the vein, which is 95% of the time a good thing, asking for forgiveness rather than permission with some of this stuff. You can only get away with that for so long, but it does lend itself nicely. As long as you're not making the same mistakes over and over again, people are generally like, you know, run this up the flagpole next time kind of thing. And that's totally fine and understandable.
Were there any waivers that you had participants sign?
No, we don't have waivers for these sorts of events. Um, we just rely on IDing people. The only thing that we have anybody fill out for an event like this is part of the policy. When a program coordinator wants to host one of these, they fill out a form and they say specifically when the event's going to be, what the event's going to be about, what's going to be served, and then it needs my signature as approval to make sure that I'm aware of what's going on. And if I do need to get board approval, if we were going to do like not just a Cinco de Mayo margarita kind of tasting, but if we were going to do a margarita fest, like let's say that, I would bring that to my board and say, hey, we're going to be serving a lot of stuff after hours at the library. I just want to make sure everybody's aware and okay with this. But other than that, no.
What other questions do folks have for Chris?
Or does anybody else do alcohol stuff? I don't want to be the only alcohol library. It's a fun
Why
day.
not?
I was in Boston in April, and oh my gosh, the main library branch in Boston is one, beautiful, and two, they have a bar.
Oh,
They have
wow.
a really cool bar,
Oh
and
my
they're
God.
it's attached to like a tea, like a high tea kind of thing. And so all of their cocktails were tea based. Oh my gosh, if you make it to Boston and do nothing else, and there's so much to do there, but go to the library and get a drink.
My friend actually just showed me pictures of that the other night. She was
Yeah,
there a week or two ago, and their hotel was right across from the Boston Library. She's like, "That's what I looked at every day."
it's
But
beautiful.
she was showing me pictures. The tea bar was so cool. I mean, it was just fantastic,
Yep.
fantastic, just beautiful. So
Yeah.
does anyone else serve alcohol at their events, or are you wanting to? And if so, why? I mean, like, was there a specific reason? Like, do you have an upcoming anniversary? Is it a program you want to do, like the margarita program? Does anyone have any? Or are you just here for fun? Go ahead, Sarah.
We used to. I'm in Wilmette. Um, and we did, I guess, starting around 2014, whenever that was passed, we would serve, we have Friday night concerts. And so we would just serve wine. They weren't part of our program. It was just a nice touch. We often served food at programs in general, all the time. And we just bought wine from like a local wine shop, and then we had to have a bartender. That was our thing, was we could not, staff could not serve it. And I don't remember if that was, I think that was a village rule that you had to have um a licensed bartender serve wine. I don't think that was our rule. And it was very popular. People loved it. Staff did not love it. It was a lot of cleanup. We did a few programs with about alcohol too. We had a very popular like home brewing program that like I guess like 10 years ago maybe was when home brewing was like super popular. And then
Mhm.
we stopped all of it with COVID. Um, and then we never brought it back. And I think um attitudes are different now about both from like patron expectations of what we will do for them. They're a little more needy and demanding than they used to be. And also, I think we do more programs. I think we got into like sort of a cycle of feeling like we really needed to program a ton after COVID to prove that like we were, or during COVID to prove we were still here. And we never really like right-sized that. So
Us-
I think
yeah.
adding food in general and liquor in particular back in is just like a step too far for a lot of our programmers. I would love it if we did fewer programs of sort of higher quality. But every programmer's programs are like the most beautiful and special. And I get that. Like it's fun, it's a fun part of your job. Um, but I don't know that we have exactly the right schedule of programs. And certainly like I think we've cut back on some of the things that made some of our, when we had fewer programs, they were a little more special. And now we just do a ton of programs that are maybe a little less special.
What's your attendance then if you're doing so many? Is the attendance still well, or is it
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I mean, for like a big concert or some of our like art lectures, we'll get 75 to 100 people. And we do a lot of programs on Zoom now that are just so they're still really popular. 5 years after we started doing Zoom programs, they're just still really popular. Um, sometimes 40 or 50, like attendance is really good. And it's not that different. I don't think alcohol was the draw. Like
right,
we're not
right?
seeing fewer people. And that's also another reason that like it's really hard to get staff to do fewer programs because
Mhm.
our community will attend anything that's free.
Yep.
But I don't know that that's always like just because people will go to it doesn't necessarily mean it's like a good use of staff time or like totally fits in with our mission. Um, like maybe we could devote some more time to other aspects of librarianship that aren't programming concerts, especially since we're already in an area that has like a ton of arts and access to lectures and community events like that. So it's a delicate balance and lots of tough conversations, I think.
Yeah, everything you're saying though absolutely resonates over here as well. Prior to COVID, they were serving food at just about every single program. They'd bring in pizza for a book discussion. They would have somebody go out and get a sheet cake and pies and coffee for a crafting program. It was kind of crazy, and I'm happy that COVID came in and said, "This is kind of gross. Don't do it anymore for at least for a while." And then when I came a couple years ago, I was like, "Well, that's just kind of a waste of staff time and money, and people are coming just for the food, not for the program. So we're not going to do that anymore." And oh my gosh, I don't know if there's anybody who lives in or around or knows anybody in Wooddale, so I'm going to say this and ask to keep it in this space, but people in this town go feral for free food. They just do. And all ages, everybody like that. And that's great and fine and good. But that can't be the sole purpose that people are coming to the library or coming to a program, especially when we're putting in a ton of time and a ton of effort and a ton of money into some of this stuff. Not to mention the cost of a program obviously is not just the presenter's fee, right? Like it's the staff pay
Mhm.
that goes into prep and setting up and running out and doing errands. And hopefully there's some sort of evaluation happening on the back end of that too. So I still get comment cards all the time that says, when are we bringing back the pizza for the mystery book discussion? Or when are we bringing back the sheet cake at the planting program? And it's like, no, we're not. And I'll say that again. But yeah, so everything you're saying resonates 100%. We still do more cooking and more food-based programs too that have nothing to do with alcohol that I'm kind of comfortable with. Um, but until we get somebody from the food department or the sanitation place to come over and say you're doing something wrong, I'm comfortable with the level of staff participation that we do have with food-based programs, um, with the exception of one. We do an annual grilling program out on our patio, and that is food that's prepared by a licensed chef, but it's prepared on site using a grill. And that's the one that I always just kind of go like this to as a director because um, the food that we generally serve at programs is prepared in a commercial grade kitchen, packaged, and then brought
Mm.
here for individual serving, which is I'm comfortable with. You can't do that with a grill when you're demoing how to grill stuff. So I usually just kind of go like this on that day out of the year. Um, but everything else that we do with food is much safer.
I'm just speechless. I'm just processing everything. We used to, this is such a nightmare to me now and just makes my blah. When I started 14 years ago, 12 years ago, we had an edible books contest, which I'm sorry, I hate them. I'm just gonna keep my other comments to myself, but we the books would the entries would sit out there for hours and then people would eat them. And I know. And most of them were cakes, but sometimes they weren't.
Yeah.
And in just starting, I was like, how y'all, like, no one in this library works at a restaurant ever? Like, no one's ever been through any kind of food training. Like, I worked at a retirement home in high school, and we didn't have to go through the hardcore training, but we knew about cross contamination and gloves and all the other stuff. And that was like, I so got rid of that as soon as I was able to,
Yeah.
because it was just a tragedy waiting to happen. But I would like to offer food at some programs. For those of you who don't know, I work at Harper College or community college. And so we've got like a whole different world, right? Because the college has got insurance, stuff, that the library is covered with. We obviously offer food programs because we have, hospitality program on campus. Our continuing education department offers stuff. So for me, the workaround going forward, if I proceed, although now I'm having some PTSD here from the two of you, is to, have a faculty member or join it with a class, like for someone who's already on campus, who already teaches wine tasting or already teaches, um, a nutrition class or whatever, and just help fund it, but not be fully responsible for it. We have book discussions usually once a month, and it's coffee and scones from our on-campus catering, or occasionally like lemonade. But I like sheet cakes and crafts makes no sense to me. I don't know how anyone ever. To me, the food has to make sense with what you're doing, or again, a coffee or cookie and or a scone for a book discussion makes sense, but I don't see how pizza does.
Exactly. It was used as it was an inappropriate use of food as a marketing tool, in my opinion. It was
Yeah,
there to say, yes, this is the program, but we're going to have food, so come to that.
yeah.
It was just an inappropriate use of marketing, right? And that's why I said no more. But what I did do, both here in Wooddale and then at my previous job in Lincolnwood, was put in coffee machines in the program room. the main program room that we have. Um, Both of them were Keurig style machines that you can easily turn them on, turn them off, cover them up, keep them away. But it made for a solution for something that was controllable, something that was like, a cup with a lid,
Mhm.
and still customizable to a sense where whatever the K cup is what you're going to get, but it's not just coffee or it's not just tea or a bottle of water or something. It's actually kind of nice.
Nice hot coffee. Does anyone else have any, speaking of going down like the crazy rabbit hole of sheet cakes and crafts, does anyone else have any like cautionary tales to share with people here who might be thinking? Because I can see where someone's like, if we serve pizza, they will come. Right? And that's good the first couple times until it turns into a complete, chaotic mess. Not to mention, like, I am so over driving all over the place to purchase food and carry it into work. I'm done, like, I don't do it anymore. So does anyone else have any like little cautionary tales to share with people here where it seemed like a good idea at the time until it wasn't? To share with people who are thinking of.
We have a program that is a Let's Create run by a staff member, and she's the ultimate hostess, and that she actually makes the refreshments. And um, she's the only one that I would ever let do that. It's the only program that we do that at, and I'm just feeling like I should pull back on that, but I'm gonna mutiny on my hands
Yeah.
if I do that. Do any of you allow anything brought from home for programs? And I haven't even run it by the insurance company yet. I'm waiting till we get our new committees up to talk about policy, because that's how it'll stop, but
We did a cookbook club where people would bring in food and people still ask for it. Again, we stopped it with COVID. Anytime I've had to make like a big change, like changing food or changing um like availability of rental spaces or whatever, we've tried to time it with like, I mean, COVID, we couldn't help, but we've tried to time it with like a construction project where we might have said, this space will be closed for several months. And then when we come back, we just don't do that thing anymore.
Yep.
And then patrons will be missing a lot of things. So they'll be glad to have what we give them back. But we definitely still do get questions about the cookbook book club. And we just say, we're happy to help you facilitate your own, but we can't host it here, but like, we'll get you the cookbooks. There were people who came to programs just to get the food and then they would leave.
Oh.
So, so we're very glad, like, the baseline through line attendance of people who come to the start and end of a program really hasn't changed since we've stopped serving food. Primarily, we still do like pizza for study snacks for our teenagers during finals. We, have a few times a year where we offer food. Some of our like we offer like a lunch and learn for businesses, like small business owners. But the like just come get a cookie and sit and watch this program, we don't do anymore. And the people who complain were the people who are only in it for the snacks anyway. So
I'm just gonna share, and again, this is not to terrify anyone, but Tuesday at work, we had a student with medical emergency that was allergy related. And this, girl comes into the library and is typing on her phone to ask where she can buy water on campus. So we assume that she was hard of hearing because a lot of times we have a large deaf population of students. They just use their phone and show it to us. So we assumed she was hard of hearing. So and we didn't know, like, Starbucks is under construction and Subway, we don't know what their summer hours are. And I could tell that she was not just looking for a bottle of water. So fortunately, our dean has a little fridge with mini bottles. I grabbed a couple and she left. And then I thought, I better follow this person and see what is going on. So I went upstairs. How she left the classroom without anybody offering assistance is, I don't understand. But her class was having a potluck and somebody made something with cashews. I guess she knew she was allergic to either nuts and didn't know cashews were nuts, or she was allergic to almonds. And now also was allergic to cashews, but like couldn't breathe, chest pains, had to call the ambulance and, bring her outside so she could get help as soon as possible because at this point, I don't know how long it was going on. That she, how long she had been feeling uncomfortable. Um, but witnessing that, I was, I was like, oh, like this teacher, we're not supposed to have outside food on campus without a waiver. We're not supposed to definitely bring your own, right? Make your own food and bring it in. But this faculty member was having a potluck for her class and everybody made stuff. And, this poor student was just didn't know and didn't have her EpiPen with her,
Mm.
so it's, um,
I get it. Yeah.
I've never witnessed it before. Like I've heard horrible stories. I've never witnessed it, but it was terrifying. And so that is a cautionary to me. I guess the other point, and this is something I'm wondering if anyone would be interested in, and it's not really marketing, but I think it would be important to talk about at some point. Chris, you could tell me what you think, or Andrea, Amber. What do you do in those situations when you have an emergency in your library? We obviously don't have ILA doesn't have a forum for an emergency forum, but it's something I think people, might want to learn about a little bit is like how do you proceed if you ever have a food related emergency or any kind of emergency and what are our responsibilities and how to proceed. So if you are interested in that, just send me an email or put it in the chat so we can kind of get people's pulse on that. But I think it's something we don't talk about, right? Is like, or if you are having some type of a cooking program and people are working with, if the demonstrator gets hurt, right? Or if it's kind of like, okay, everyone follow along, and then there's some type of an emergency or accident, would be interested to know. So so I don't know, just be mindful of
Yeah, I mean, stuff from home is always risky. And the only way that I've heard libraries kind of continue with the cookbook book club and have people bring stuff from home is they basically turn it into a room reservation rather than a library sponsored program. Which based on whatever that individual library's policy is for meeting room reservations, you can allow food or you cannot allow food. But once it's not a library sponsored program anymore, the onus or the responsibility of home cooked meals kind of drops off of the library. And whether that is philosophically acceptable to you or to somebody else in your organization is up to you. It's not something that I've been willing to pursue here. It's also not really something that people are asking for, which is kind of surprising to me. But if they did, I wouldn't be interested in hosting something like that, even if it were under the guise of a room reservation. Um, Mainly for what Christine just said, right? Um, it's the same reason why I do not allow people to fall asleep in the library. I had a colleague once who had somebody fall asleep and just frankly not wake up. And I don't want to go through that with staff. I don't want to personally go through that, and I don't want anybody on our staff to go through that. It's just kind of one of those very situational, very individual types of decisions for you and your organization or whoever leads your organization, but it's not something that I'm interested in getting into over here.
I think like Chris, you bring up a good point too, because we have a wellness coordinator on campus and we've talked about things to offer for students. They're tired and she bought 2 like massage chairs for them to use. And having worked at a hair salon for a long time, and those of you who are moms who had girls who went to cheerleading camp, um, my mind just goes to life, goes to lice. And
Yeah.
I'm like, and she's like, well, I can support and buy one for the library. And I was thinking, hell no, I don't
Yeah.
want to deal with that. Right. But to that point, there is this fine line with how do you balance, oh Lord, ringworm.
Yeah.
How do you balance, at least for us, because we are on a college campus, how do you balance wellness and supporting students, but then saying, you really can't sleep here and all these other things like that's rough too. So we actually as part of our food pantry we have prepackaged like dinner meals in a brown bag and it's all prepackaged, like mini macaroni and cheese or ramen and like a granola bar and something else, right? But even at that, so we're a pickup location after a certain hour because the food pantry is closed. What if a student doesn't read the container and realize that the granola bar has whatever in it? And again, they're very basic foods, but that's not to say that someone's not going to have a reaction to something. But
Right.
you're right to that point, Chris. Like then it's on my hands. You know, the food pantry's not open and this kid is eating ramen with, you know, whatever,
Yeah.
something in it. They're going to come back to us and be like, you know, my throat's my throat's closing up, right? It's just, and we're not prepared for, or we're not trained for that, educated on that. So that's,
Yeah.
the balance is rough, right? To do good
I
things
mean,
for our communities and still keep everyone safe.
exactly. And where do you toe that line and what's too far, what's not? Lynn, you had your hand up though. I don't want to.
I was just gonna suggest you're at a junior college, you said.
Mhm.
Right, have you met Dr. Morris from Illinois Valley Community College?
Mm-mm.
She's got some really nice supportive programs for students, and she might be someone to reach out to. I don't know who administers their food support program, but I know they have freezers now, I think.
Okay.
I don't know all, but I'm she's progressive with
Okay.
that. So you might even come up, they might even have some other things that your college might be interested in. And
Cool.
that's,
Thank you for that.
yeah, that's just in our very backyard. We're just a small library. We only serve 4,200 district residents. And I so struggle just getting people in the door. Um, COVID, they stayed closed longer than anybody else did. We don't have the money to compete with the other local libraries. The downtown has its share of taverns with food or bars and food. Um, I'm going to try to do even just a summer reading kickoff thing tomorrow, and we are going to serve an ice cream sundae, but um, just for their little party after the movie. But
Mhm.
I just am not. I just can't get people in.
Yeah.
And I can't do near what you do at all, the
Sure.
spectacular concerts, and it is me as a director and part-time staff that work 13 and a half hours a week.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I came from one of the larger libraries and ran the youth department, and I can't even do what I want to do in youth.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to run the toddler program and a story time program and be the director and run an adult book club. And
Wow. Yeah.
sports is huge in this town. Travel ball is huge in this town. The school does an after school board game twice a week after school. So that takes Tuesday and Thursday.
Hmm.
Fridays, I'm not going to get anybody. Wednesday's the CCD. It's just, ugh, it's tough.
Yeah. One thing that I was going to mention next was field trips and offsite programming and how that can kind of be a nice answer to some of this. We're very fortunate over here in Wooddale for many reasons, but one of them is the Linford Winery place in Roselle is 10 minutes away from us. It's a winery where they don't obviously grow the grapes there. They grow them kind of around the world, mostly in South America, but then they ship them up here and they process them over there. And so we're going to partner with them pretty soon. I think within the next year, they have kind of a wait list at this point, but you can basically pay them to schedule a tour and a sampling at their facility. So they're doing all of it over there. And this is the first time we're doing a field trip where we're asking people to get themselves to and from. Typically, we would get a bus, which adds a bunch of expense to it. But since it's right here, and I don't know if there's any breweries or if there's any places like that in town where you could host a trivia night or you could just host a beer lesson or something at their facility. So you have your name associated with it. Maybe you chip them some money just for the space, but patrons are buying whatever they're sampling or whatever they want to taste, but they're still getting a little bit of a lecture and you have your name on it. That may be a solution too.
Thank you. I just have
Mhm.
to come up with the money.
Yeah. I wish there was like a grant for get butts and seats or something from the state, right?
Yeah.
There's a grant for a lot of stuff and all that's drying up, unfortunately. But Yeah, I wish that there was something like just the relevancy components of what we do and the shifting dynamic of what we do need to do to get people to interact with us.
And you know, that's where I get kind of frustrated that, you know, I mean this in no disrespect, but at what point do we draw the line and
Yeah.
say, I'm not gonna stand on my head?
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know.
I know, and that's one of the reasons why I've kind of stayed away from a typical strategic plan as a director. I love the components of a strategic plan, the surveying and the sampling and the testing and the figuring out all of that kind of stuff. But I don't know what the hell the world's going to be like in 1, 2, 3 years from now. I don't want to put something down on paper that says I'm going to accomplish this over the next 3 years because I think as we all learned, like that dynamic just shifts. I think a lot of us could have predicted where the world is right now 6 months ago or 8 months ago, where we are. But in a lot of ways, it's even worse than what I would have ever expected, let alone what's going to be coming over the next year and a half before midterm elections or the next 3.5 years before we can make some hopefully bigger changes. Um, so yeah, to your point, when do we stop standing on our heads to get people in the door? When do we have to stop having these giant events and trying to one up the next organization in town? We're constantly in a battle with our park district over we do something over here and then they all of a sudden get this magical money and then they can go replicate it over there and do it somehow sometimes better. And so where do we draw the line with that? And maybe it is more partnerships, maybe it is more coalitions. If you've got neighboring libraries that have more money than you, partner with them, get them to pay for it, and just throw your name on it. Maybe that's a way to go.
It's interesting you say that about the park district because I had a gentleman that said, yes, I'll do a metal detecting camp for you. And after that first year, the city went to them and said, would you do that for us? And he told me, and I said, don't worry about us anymore. Don't do this twice. Just, as long as the kids get the experience. But I was a little like, gosh, that was one of the unique things that we were able to offer at my other library. And, was
Yeah.
frustrated by that. But it's interesting, my director who's since retired from that library just said it's a pendulum swing because we had these all-day camps open up and it was wonderful for daycare. And we had the city camps and the college camps and the business camps. And she said it's a pendulum swing. And now I'm seeing the all-day camp is still advertising for the summer. They've never had to do that. The city's still saying, hey, we have openings. They've never had to do that. I don't
Wow.
I don't know what's happening because I'm not in those two other larger communities that we are surrounded by, but maybe parents aren't wanting to pay this year.
It could be. I mean, I know I live in the city of Chicago and I don't have kids, but I saw on so many message boards that the cost of the day camps for summer went up like 40, 50% for some people, especially the non-subsidized folks. And it's like, it still seemed affordable to me. I mean, it was like, I don't know, something like $500 or $600 for the entire summer. So we're talking 3 months of stuff. But for people um, who that's not comfortable with or who weren't expecting a 40, 50% increase, like, yeah, then you do have to make some decisions and say, ugh, I guess the kids are staying at home alone this summer rather than going to the park district, or I guess we're just not going to be doing that library program because we can't afford it, or whatever the case may be.
The,
Yeah, I mean, stuff
the
is crazy expensive.
new theater has really picked up in this area. It's camps, so it's a moneymaker for these little theaters that, your homegrown theaters. And that's kind of the new thing that I see. Lots of opportunities for kids to be in a play, which is good for the arts.
That's
Yeah.
yeah, that's great.
How can I switch really quick and ask how you're all marketing? Because again, I'm one person here and just the basics of making the flyer and posting on social media and then archiving my social media and putting it on my website and keeping current with that. Now, records retention says archive your website. Even if your company does it for you, you need to keep your own records. I'm like, I'm doing things 2 and 3 times
Yeah.
to just talk about one program.
Yeah.
What's working for everybody?
I mean, I have to say this probably is going to go against the marketers in the room, but I'm kind of a one-person show as well. Like I'm the coordinator of access services and engagement. And oh, by the way, marketing, oh, by the way, program, oh, by the way, facilities. Like somehow because I'm access services, everyone loves to be like, Christine, there's gum on the floor. And I'm like, okay, but it's users are there. I'm like, so now it's my problem. Okay, but whatever. Like my book discussion group is really only community members. The students don't come, they don't have time, they don't want to be forced to read something, even if it's fun. I engage with the students in another way. So it's really just community members. My team is a lot younger than I am, and they're all about social media, which I appreciate. However, my concern sometimes with social media, the other day, one of my team members was like, Christine, can you send me the summer dates and I'll put it on social media? And I'm like, for what? Like my community members, they're retired folks. They don't follow Harper College Library's Instagram or Facebook or whatever the hell we have. They already come. That's not how they roll. I literally like don't even take the time to create the post and put up it doesn't matter. And
Yeah.
that's my concern with social media. And is that I think sometimes we go to it all the time, or we think I need signs and flyers and this and this and this. And it's like, you don't. You put something out there. It depends on who you're marketing to. If it was a teen program, it would be different. If it was, if it was like little kids, it would be different. So I think it's a matter like don't just do things because you're supposed to. I don't even market this book discussion on campus. I create a flyer. It goes into the one continuing education newsletter that we have. I don't do bulletin boards. I don't do signs. When I do, it's to keep my boss happy. Okay. And you know what? I just threw away a stack of flyers yesterday from last semester. But I've had this book discussion for 10 years now, and it's a lot of the same folks, and it's grown from their word of mouth. So I think that just being mindful of uh not wasting your time truthfully on things that just are not working. And someone in the chat mentioned Canva. Canva's fantastic. That's easy to use.
I have to have it visible when I do have a board, and I have to have it visible because the public needs to see we are doing something.
Yeah.
I've sent it all to the paper, nothing, but other libraries, something. And then I hear, aren't you sending things to the paper? Well, yes, I am, but I don't have control whether they put it in or not. And we're gonna have, after Summer Fun Fest this weekend, 4-page layouts of people on roller coasters, but my programming still isn't in the paper. And
Wow.
So Lynn, I wonder, years ago, I have no idea what library it was, and I think they were part of a district. But they were kind of located by a train station. And they were having similar issues, like programs weren't hitting it. Certain computers, like no one ever used their computers. It was like and they ended up focusing on paperback books because they got a huge commuter.
there you go.
Okay, so like because they were by the train station, everyone coming in was like they just wanted their quickie, their bestsellers, their paperback books for the train and back. I don't know what the situation was. I think it was an area where a lot of people didn't live. So they were not going to bring their kids to that library location on the weekends for a program. They went to the one closer to their house. So I think it's partly of like knowing where you fit in. And so it's hard if you have bosses who think we need to do everything like everyone else.
No, I don't.
But if you've got that like if you're like, hey, we only have students, or we only have commuters, or we only have this, it's leaning into that, I think is gonna save you some mental anguish.
Yeah.
I mean, making the stuff is easy, posting is easy, but then it's the requirement of record retention and
Yeah.
ugh,
Lynn,
yeah.
do you have email marketing going as well as the print guide?
We do, our website allows us to send a newsletter out. I know my newsletter is not and I have to have time to do the newsletter, and I have to reformat it so it's ADA accessible.
Oh, you mean the e-news?
Mhm.
Yeah.
But just the print or the visual, that would be my newsletter. That's my next hurdle is, our board agendas and minutes. They're not ADA accessible yet. Our website is, we're with a company that specializes in that, but
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I was,
Anyways, I don't want to hog any more time, but I just kind of
Oh.
wondered if anybody was, I'm in such I'm kind of a unicorn in this meeting because we are so small and surrounded by two larger libraries. So
Well,
I
Lynn, thank you
have to
for
work.
sharing, because I think like that could possibly be a topic for a future session is if we focus on, you know, collect together people from really small libraries and kind of how that we might want to focus on that for future session, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, my library's not that, well, it's bigger, but our district population is about 12,000. And one of the nice things about Wooddale that they do really well, I think, is they have one newsletter for all the taxing bodies. So we each have upwards of, I think we have 7 pages in it, but it's got the park district has a couple pages, the school, the high school, the police department, the fire district, and of course the city. Anybody who's a taxing body has a couple pages in that, and we all share the costs of printing. We all share the cost of the designer who puts it together, and then of course the postage. And that just works really, really nicely, I think, for people, for residents, because they have one place to look for everything.
You know,
Um,
that's a great idea. Our city just went to an e-newsletter and I'm never like right with them when I have to have my materials to them. But maybe what I could do is work with them and say, give me your layout. Can I add a page for the library? And then we also have we are Oglesby Group and they put my stuff in. Um, I never thought to ask them just for my own page rather than them trying to set it in since it is e-newsletter now.
Yeah.
yeah, and then they've got the captive audience too, right? So you can tap right into that as
Yeah.
well.
It's
So
not like,
we're about a time. Yes. Yeah. 12 o'clock. There's my, yeah. I feel like every clock in my house has a different time on it. So we're at time. So thank you for joining us today. And check the ILA forum page on ILA's website going forward to see some of our upcoming future programs. But we want to thank everyone for joining us. And Chris, do you have any final parting words for us?
Um, I would say one, be careful when if you are planning to rip the Band-Aid off of food or alcohol because it's really tough to put it back on.
Mm.
We don't want to go through another pandemic just to kind of squash those things. So, but that's the level of what it kind of needs to be able to stop some of that, or a big construction project or something like that. Um, and we maybe didn't get a good conversation going on all of the topics that we were hoping to. We didn't talk too much about food and planning for that and safety with that. So if anybody does have any questions for how we do it over here in Wooddale, please feel free to reach out. I can drop my email in the chat.
Thanks, Chris, for everything you shared. It was a good discussion, guys.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not the know-all on all of that kind of stuff, and a lot of this is just kind of like I said initially, like kind of waiting for somebody from the health department to come over and slap me on the wrist or something, and I'm ready and willing and able to take that. But you know, I will say that the patrons who come to the things that are food specific or alcohol specific leave happy, leave satisfied, and sometimes even leave with a cookbook in their hand or a cocktail book in their hand or something as well. So.
I think the most important part about these conversations is obviously networking and meeting other people, but also um, just kind of knowing what I like. No one's got answers, but we all kind of now have stuff to think about. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Have a good
Bye.
weekend. Bye.